A 73-year-old man sat alone one evening, engaging in something he'd done countless times before. It seemed harmless, even familiar. But this time the outcome was different. That night, he didn't just lose control of his body, he lost a part of himself that would never return. And here's the surprising part. It wasn't because he masturbated, it was because of the way he did it and what he didn't understand. Yes, masturbation later in life can silently damage the very areas of your well-being you're trying to protect unless you know the truths I'm about to share. I'm Dr. James, a men's health specialist, with more than 3 decades of experience supporting seniors through some of the most delicate seasons of their lives. I've worked with thousands of men over the age of 60, and I've seen the consequences when they're left uninformed about their sexual health. I'm not only speaking as a doctor, I'm speaking as a man who has witnessed his generation grow older, struggle silently, and wonder quietly, is this still normal? Am I doing something wrong? Here's the truth. Most older men have been masturbating the same way since their 20s. But the body, the mind, and the heart change after 60. What once brought relief can slowly begin to drain your stamina, your vitality, and even your self-esteem. So why is this topic so rarely addressed? Why do so many men stick to old habits, unaware they're slowly paying a price they never agreed to? In this video, I'm going to uncover 5 masturbation truths that every older man should know. Insights that could protect your prostate, boost your circulation, and help you remain sexually active, safe and satisfied well into your 70s and beyond. These aren't scare tactics. They are lessons meant to empower you. Because knowledge truly is power, and it's never too late to take it back. Stick with me through the end because the last truth may be the one that makes the biggest difference in how long you stay strong, independent, and sexually vibrant. Most doctors won't talk about this, but once you understand it, you'll wish someone had told you years ago. Now let's get into the 5 masturbation truths. Older men wish they had learned earlier insights that could have preserved their health, boosted their confidence, and completely transformed how they experienced aging. Secret 1. Your erection is no longer the entire story. And that's perfectly fine. There comes a point in every older man's life when he notices that his body doesn't respond the way it once did. Blood flow slows, sensations change, and what used to be effortless now takes thought, patience, and sometimes frustration. For many men, this moment brings a quiet sense of alarm. A voice inside starts whispering, "Something must be wrong with me." But here's the truth, no one ever explained this to us. Your erection isn't the whole picture anymore, and that's nothing to be ashamed of. The reality is, our generation was raised to link sexual success with performance. Firmness meant strength. Lasting longer meant you were powerful. And if you couldn't perform on demand, something had to be broken or failing. But those beliefs were shaped in our youth, encouraged by media, pop culture, and an unrealistic standard of masculinity. As time went on, no one rewrote the guidebook for us. No one sat us down and said, "Your body is evolving, but that doesn't make you any less of a man." I've had many men, some in their 60s, 70s, even 80s, sit in my office, tears in their eyes, convinced that losing the ability to get fully erect meant losing their masculinity. What they don't realize is that the body is simply entering a new chapter 1, where the emphasis moves from stiffness to connection, from proving something to being fully present. They still want intimacy, still long for closeness, but feel disoriented because no one ever told them that orgasm and erection are not the same thing. Yes, that's right. You can still have deeply satisfying release without needing a full erection. The orgasmic system is separate from the mechanism of arousal. Yet most older men have never been taught this. They've never been guided through the changes that naturally come with age. Instead, they're left to misinterpret these changes as signs of failure rather than signs of growth. Why is this knowledge so rare? Because our culture doesn't like to talk about older men and sexuality? We talk about pills and treatments, but not about understanding. Doctors avoid the topic. Families ignore it. And most men are too embarrassed to bring it up even with close friends. The result? Generations of men silently burdened with guilt, confusion, and shame about something entirely normal. Let me tell you about Charles, a 72-year-old man I worked with recently. He arrived feeling defeated, ashamed, and ready to abandon his sex life altogether. He told me, "Doc, it's like the lights are on but nobody's home." We talked. We unpacked years of silence and false expectations. I explained that pleasure doesn't vanish, it evolves. And with a bit of patience and self-kindness, he could rediscover fulfillment just in a new form. 2 months later, he came back and said he was feeling something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. That's why this first secret is so essential. When you let go of the need to perform and start focusing on what truly feels good, a whole new world opens up. Touch becomes purposeful. Time becomes your companion, not your opponent. And intimacy, whether with yourself or with a partner, takes on a deeper meaning, no longer judged by firmness, but by presence. Older men need to hear this truth not only from doctors, but from one another. You're not broken. You're adjusting. And this transformation is not the end. It's an invitation. It's an opportunity to reconnect with your body in a way you may have never explored before. But why do so few men understand this? Why aren't we ever taught that our sexual identity is more than physical performance? Because we live in a society that idolizes youth and turns a blind eye to aging, especially regarding male sexuality. And yet this silence is costing us more than we recognize. It's time to end that silence for ourselves and for the men who come after us. So if something hasn't felt right lately, I want you to hear this clearly. It's not just you. And it's absolutely not too late. Your journey doesn't stop with aging. It begins again with clarity. While the erection may no longer be the star of the show, what's possible when you release that expectation can be even more meaningful. And speaking of meaning, what if I told you that masturbation after 60 isn't only about sex? It's about your emotions, your nervous system, and your overall well-being. In the next part, I'll reveal something most men never hear: the emotional truth behind why many seniors still turn to self-pleasure, and why ignoring it could be slowly draining your energy. Stay with me. This may surprise you. Secret 2. Masturbation is not just physical, it's emotional and neurological. Many men assume masturbation is simply about climax, a short-lived physical release, a solitary instinct, nothing more. But after spending more than 30 years working with older men, I've come to realize it's far more layered and far more vital. Masturbation, especially in your 60s, 70s, and beyond, goes beyond the physical. It engages your emotions, your brain, and your psyche. And the reason so many older men are unaware of this is simple: no one ever told us. No one believed we'd still crave pleasure, let alone require it to feel emotionally balanced. I recall one of my patients, Howard, a retired veteran in his late 70s. He didn't come to me because of a physical issue, but because he felt emotionally numb, flat, and detached, like he was just coasting through life. As we spoke, it became obvious that masturbation had become his coping mechanism, not for pleasure, but for peace. It helped him rest. It eased his nerves after difficult days. In his own words, it was his reset button. Yet he had never made that connection. He believed it was just a leftover habit from his younger days. He had no idea this quiet, solitary act was actually fulfilling a critical emotional role, helping him regulate. And he's far from alone. Scientific research now confirms that many men over 60 rely on masturbation to manage emotional challenges like stress, isolation, sadness, and even fear. It's not just about desire, it's about staying grounded. It's about reclaiming a sense of control when everything around us feels unpredictable. But here's where it gets complicated. Most of us were never taught to examine our emotional world, let alone how it relates to our sexual patterns. We're men. We were raised to tough it out, to suppress our feelings, to stay composed. So when we find ourselves touching ourselves not from desire, but from sadness or restlessness, we don't fully grasp what's happening. And without that understanding, we risk turning what could be a healing practice into something empty or even damaging. That's why this truth matters. In later years, masturbation often becomes a tool for emotional survival. And when done with mindfulness, it can be genuinely healthy, sometimes even therapeutic. But if it's done on autopilot, it can start to exhaust you. Not because the act itself is wrong, but because you're no longer mentally or emotionally present for it. You're escaping instead of connecting. And over time, quietly and gradually, that can drain your energy and joy. We also need to talk about what happens chemically. After orgasm, the brain releases a surge of powerful chemicals: oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, all of which affect your mood, sleep quality, drive, and even memory. This release can be a lifeline for older adults dealing with sadness or insomnia. But here's the catch: it only helps if you understand what's behind the behavior. Too often, older men get stuck in routine. The same habits, the same mental loops, the same timing, and over time the brain stops responding with the same vitality. It becomes dull. Why? Because it's not being engaged in fresh or meaningful ways. That's why adjusting your mindset is so critical. Don't treat masturbation like a mechanical routine. Think of it as an intentional act. Ask yourself, am I doing this to feel connected to myself, or am I avoiding a deeper feeling? Am I choosing this moment with clarity, or am I just trying to fill a gap? The truth is, no one ever taught us to be this self-aware, especially when it comes to emotions, because men's inner lives have been overlooked for decades, particularly as we age. People assume we stop having feelings, that we become hardened, detached, uninterested. But that has never been true. If anything, we feel more now than we did in our youth. We've just gotten more skilled at hiding it. And sometimes the only place those feelings come out is when we're completely alone. So let this be an invitation to bring those hidden layers into the light, to respect the emotional and neurological side of your sexual self, to stop pretending that touch is just physical. Because it's not. It's memory, it's emotion, it's survival. And when embraced with awareness, it can also become a source of healing. And now, here's something most men don't realize, especially those who haven't been sexually active for a long time. While masturbation can comfort the heart, it can also strengthen the body. In the next section, I'll share a truth that may protect your sexual health for years to come. The quiet truth about use it or lose it, and what truly happens to a man's body when sexual activity stops after the age of 60. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Secret 3, the use it or lose it principle is real, but often misunderstood. There's a difficult reality that many older men don't hear until it's far too late. When it comes to your sexual function, if you stop engaging it, you genuinely can lose it. What almost no one explains is how this decline unfolds, or how deeply it can impact not only your sex life, but your entire identity. This isn't about fear-mongering. It's about awareness, about understanding the subtle shifts that gradually take place inside your body over time, and why so many good men eventually ask, why isn't anything working anymore, when the answer has been hiding in silence for years? As men get older, blood vessels gradually constrict, nerve endings become less responsive, and the penile tissues begin to lose their flexibility. These changes aren't random. They're biological reactions to one key factor: lack of use. Just like muscles weaken when not exercised, your sexual system also starts to shut down when it's not regularly engaged. And here's the part that truly breaks my heart. Most older men don't realize this is happening until it's already well underway. I've witnessed it countless times in my practice. A man in his late 60s or 70s reconnects with someone after years of being on his own. Maybe he's a widower. Maybe he went through a divorce. Maybe he simply gave up on intimacy for a while. Then, when the spark of desire finally returns, he finds that his body doesn't respond. It's not just a delay, it's a change. Numbness, lack of sensitivity, sometimes even pain. And the hardest part, He starts to believe something is wrong with him when in truth, it's a predictable outcome of long-term inactivity. Why isn't this talked about earlier? Why is such a fundamental truth absent from most conversations about aging? Because sexual wellness after 60 is still treated like a luxury, something optional, as though pleasure, connection, and physical closeness stop mattering once your hair turns gray. It's a harmful myth, one that quietly steals from countless older men the chance to sustain a part of themselves that could have remained vital with just a little ongoing care. Let me tell you about Roy. He was 74 when he came to my office. He hadn't been intimate with anyone for more than 10 years, not because he lacked desire, but because life had simply taken its toll. His wife had passed away. He had grown used to being alone. Over time, he even stopped touching himself altogether. Then he met someone new. He was thrilled but also confused when his body didn't react. He tried medication creams, even devices. None of it worked the way he'd hoped. I gently explained that what he was experiencing wasn't dysfunction, it was disuse. His penile tissue had gradually atrophied. Blood flow had decreased. Nerve signals had dulled. No one had ever told him this could happen. But there's good news. With time, gentle stimulation, and regular engagement, even solo, he began to feel a change. It didn't happen instantly. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. His body slowly began to remember. And along with that, his confidence returned, and with it, a renewed sense of being fully alive in ways he thought he had lost forever. This is why masturbation, especially in your later years, is not just about pleasure. It's about upkeep. It helps maintain blood flow to sensitive tissues. It tells your body this still matters, and your body responds. You're not just preserving a physical function, you're preserving your sense of self in ways that are both deeply emotional and profoundly personal. Many men believe that without a partner, their sexual well-being isn't worth prioritizing. But that's one of the most damaging myths out there. You don't need a relationship to remain sexually alive. What you need is presence, curiosity, and steady practice. And the beautiful reality is that regular attention, even just once a week, can prepare you to re-enter intimacy with someone else fully engaged and confident, simply because you never allowed that part of yourself to fade away. Don't wait for a future relationship to reconnect with your body. Keep that connection strong now, because the moment you neglect it, your body begins to forget. And the longer it forgets, the harder it becomes to recall what once came naturally. There's also one more hidden threat I've seen, time and time again, one that many men fail to notice until their energy, desire, and capacity for deep intimacy have already started to slip away. In the next section, we're going to explore something nearly every man has leaned on, especially in times of loneliness, but which may be quietly rewiring your brain in damaging ways. This next secret could be affecting you more than you realize. Stick with me. Secret 4. Porn may be undermining your natural sexual reflexes without you even noticing. When you're alone, particularly as an older man, it's easy to slip into habits that feel comforting. The house is quiet. It's late at night. You instinctively reach for what's familiar: your phone, your tablet, maybe your computer. A few taps and you're watching something that offers fast, predictable satisfaction. You barely think about it. It becomes automatic. And in that moment, it works. But over time, something subtle but troubling begins to change. You find your arousal doesn't last as long. Your climax feels weaker. Your desire for real intimacy begins to fade. You don't feel broken, but something inside you feels off. And this right here is the hidden cost of a habit that has quietly spiraled over years. Pornography, especially in older age, may be slowly eroding your natural sexual responses, and most men have no idea it's happening. This isn't about guilt or judgment, it's about science. I've witnessed this again and again, men in their 60s, 70s, even into their 80s, confused about why their body no longer reacts to touch as it once did, or why real-life intimacy no longer excites them. They blame it on aging hormones, stress. But often the true cause is overstimulation years, sometimes decades of repeated porn exposure. And unlike in our younger years, the consequences now run deeper and last longer. You see, the brain is wired with something called the reward system. It's the part that teaches us what to desire, what to seek out, and what feels good. When you engage with high-intensity porn, especially while alone, your brain becomes overwhelmed with dopamine, the chemical that fuels pleasure. Initially, it feels incredible. But much like any addictive pattern, the brain adapts. It starts craving more stimulation, more novelty, more extremes. What once excited you now barely has an effect. Your threshold keeps rising. And as that threshold increases, your ability to enjoy real human intimacy begins to diminish. This becomes especially dangerous for older men because our brains no longer adapt as easily as they once did. Neuroplasticity. The brain's natural ability to form new healthy habits slows with age. So if you've been depending on porn for years, particularly as your main outlet for sexual arousal, the neural pathways become fixed. Eventually, your brain no longer reacts to natural triggers like imagination, emotion, or even loving touch. I call this condition arousal fatigue, and it's far more common than most realize, especially among aging men. The saddest part? Most never recognize it. They assume their libido is fading due to age side effects of medication or stress. They don't realize their brain has been reprogrammed to respond only to artificial high-intensity images, and that's why the real thing no longer excites them. I remember one patient, Ernest, a 68-year-old retired widower. He started watching porn nightly just to feel a trace of connection, any connection at all. In the beginning, it gave him comfort. But over time, he noticed he couldn't feel emotionally or physically close to another person, not even in casual conversation. It was like his senses had gone silent. He felt detached, distant, and incredibly discouraged. Together, we began a slow and intentional process of breaking his dependency. It took time, but eventually Ernest began to reconnect with his own body without screens, just using breath memory and self-awareness. Gradually, his senses reawakened. He stopped living in the shadow of yesterday and began engaging with the present again fully vividly. What pains me most is knowing that so many older men have no idea this is even happening to them. No one explains how pornography can deeply alter the aging brain, so they silently drift away from their natural sense of pleasure, blaming age instead of understanding the true cause. But the good news is it's reversible. You can retrain your brain. You can restore your natural responses. It starts by stepping away from the screen, even if just temporarily. Give your brain the chance to rediscover your body's real sensations. Breathe with awareness. Slow things down. Touch yourself not to perform, but to reconnect. You may be amazed by what's still inside you, by what hasn't gone away, only been forgotten. And once you interrupt that pattern, something incredible happens. Your imagination starts to return. Your sensitivity becomes richer. And your longing for genuine connection, whether with yourself or someone else, begins to flourish once more. This isn't the end of your sexual journey. It's the start of taking it back from what's been quietly draining it. And now there's one last truth you need to hear, one that brings everything together. Because self-pleasure, when approached with intention, is not something to feel ashamed of or hide from. In truth, it might be one of the most vital practices for preserving your health, uplifting your mood, and even extending your quality of life. In this final insight, I'll explain why this often misunderstood act may actually be one of your strongest allies in aging well. Stay with me. You won't want to miss what comes next. Secret 5. Most physicians won't mention it, but masturbation can be a lifeline. After decades of working with men over 60, there's one phrase I hear again and again, and it always hits me hard. I didn't know it was still okay to do that at my age. They say it quietly, sometimes avoiding eye contact, their voices tinged with guilt or embarrassment, as if they've committed some unspoken offense. But the reality couldn't be further from that. Masturbation, particularly in older men, is not only acceptable, it's often one of the healthiest choices you can make. It supports more than just sexual gratification. It helps balance emotions, reinforces physical vitality, and even upholds your dignity. What's truly unfortunate is that most aging men never hear this message. And the reason most healthcare providers simply won't address it. Why is that? Because medical training tends to focus on problems, illnesses, prescriptions, surgeries. We are rarely taught how to talk about joy, connection, identity, or the subtle, solitary habits that keep a man emotionally steady. This kind of conversation is usually absent in clinical settings. As a result, millions of men are left in quiet confusion, wondering if their desires or routines are somehow shameful or unsafe. And that unspoken doubt becomes the true danger. Let's clear things up. Masturbation, when practiced mindfully and with care, offers tangible health advantages for men in later life. It increases blood flow to the pelvic region, keeping tissues healthy. It encourages better prostate function by helping the body flush out stagnant fluids. It promotes deeper sleep by releasing soothing neurochemicals like serotonin and oxytocin. It can even lift your mood and reduce feelings of isolation, something many seniors experience but rarely discuss. But this conversation isn't just about biology. It's about identity. When an older man disconnects from his sexuality, he often disconnects from a vital piece of himself. He begins to feel invisible not just to those around him, but to his own reflection. He stops seeing himself as someone who still deserves closeness, who still holds desire, who still matters as a full human being. And over time, his emotional world begins to shrink. He doesn't just grow older, he begins to feel smaller inside. I've witnessed this too often. One gentleman I supported, Walter, hadn't experienced physical touch, not even from himself, in nearly 6 years. After losing his wife, he convinced himself that those days were behind him, that seeking out physical comfort alone was inappropriate, maybe even harmful. But as time passed, his mood grew heavier. His sleep began to suffer, and he became easily irritated. It wasn't until we had a real honest conversation that he started to recognize the impact sexual touch had on his emotional stability. I'll never forget the moment he looked at me and quietly said, "I didn't know I was still allowed to be a man." That statement has stayed with me ever since. The truth is, far too many older men have absorbed the belief that sexuality, especially self-pleasure, is only for the young. That past a certain age, it's foolish, inappropriate, or even irrelevant. But that mindset is deeply damaging. The longing for touch, for release, for intimacy doesn't vanish as we grow older. It simply evolves. And if we respect that evolution, if we approach it with curiosity and compassion, we don't lose ourselves. We rediscover ourselves, often in a way that's richer and more profound than we ever expected. Why don't more doctors share this truth? Because many are uncomfortable. Because their training didn't include how to address aging and sexuality with grace and honesty. Because they fear opening a door they don't know how to navigate. And sadly, because they wrongly assume you wouldn't want to talk about it anyway. But I'm here to assure you, you are not alone. Thousands of older men are quietly wondering the same things, wrestling with the same doubts, and carrying the same questions. And it's not too late for any of you. You still have the right to feel. You still have the right to want. You still have the right to treat your body with care and affection. Masturbation is not a failure of connection. It can be a form of connection. A bridge between your physical self and your emotional needs. A quiet declaration that says, "I still matter." So if you've been burdened by private shame, questioning whether your habits are strange, harmful, or embarrassing, it's time to release those fears. What you choose to do in your own space with awareness and self-respect is not only acceptable, it is restorative. And in a world that too often overlooks older men, this may be one of the last true forms of personal dignity you still own. Because at the heart of it, masturbation is not the enemy. The real threat is silence. And once that silence is shattered, you begin to reclaim the pieces of yourself that were never truly gone, only waiting to be remembered. You've made it through all 5 truths. But there's one final message I want to leave you with. something that weaves it all together into one clear, lasting truth. Stay with me for the conclusion. It just might change how you view aging and yourself forever. Conclusion. 5. Self-pleasure. Secrets. Older men wish they'd known sooner. If you've stayed with me this long, I want to speak from the heart. Thank you. Thank you for staying open-minded, for being curious, and for having the courage to explore a subject that most men your age were never taught to speak about. That alone places you among a rare and courageous group of men who refuse to give up, refuse to retreat, and refuse to let silence dictate how they experience the final chapters of life. We started this journey by confronting a belief that many aging men carry, without even realizing it, that their sexuality fades away, that their desire must disappear, and that self-pleasure somehow becomes inappropriate after 60 or 70. But what we've uncovered together is something far more real and empowering. First, we acknowledge that while erections may change, the ability to experience pleasure does not need to vanish. Your body isn't failing, it's transforming. Then we peeled back the emotional layers hidden beneath self-touch. The anxiety, the isolation, the longing for connection, and how so many men don't recognize that what they're doing isn't merely physical, it's deeply emotional and neurologically driven. Next, we expose the reality of neglect. When sexual function is ignored, the body gradually loses its responsiveness. It isn't simply aging, it's inactivity that does the most harm. When we address the impact of excessive pornography use, we saw how overstimulation can rewire the brain and dull our response to genuine heartfelt intimacy, a struggle many men quietly endure without understanding why. And finally, we discussed what most physicians still fail to mention, that masturbation later in life can be a lifeline, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, and psychologically. It can restore dignity, identity, and inner peace. These 5 insights are more than just suggestions. They're invitations, calls to return to your body with gentleness, to stop criticizing the natural changes, and to stop waiting for someone else to give you permission to feel again. You don't need a partner to validate your experience. You don't have to match the performance of your youth. What matters most is your willingness to listen to your body, to notice its signals, to embrace the quiet sparks of vitality that still belong to you. I'm not speaking as a doctor in this moment. I speak as a man who has stood alongside hundreds of other men who once believed they were broken only to learn they were simply unaware. Men who thought their time had passed only to find out the truth had arrived just in time. You are not too old. You are not out of chances. You are not finished. Connection, joy, and renewal are still within your reach if you're open to seeking them. So no matter your age, no matter your past, I hope you walk away from this video with one powerful message. Your body may grow older, but your right to feel, to connect, and to be whole, that never has an expiration date.